Hi, this is Sibila Extreme Vocal and a review of the course featuring Will Ramos, the ultimate path to extreme vocals. During the last few months, I've been asked about this course for several times, both by some of my students and some of the viewers. And finally, I've had a chance to test it on my own and have some practice. I would like to thank very much Tony, who inspired me and finally convinced me to give it a shot and share my feedback with him and other people interested in this course. Thank you, you were a great help in this matter. Alright, and now let's begin! While taking this course, I put all of my experience as a vocalist and a vocal teacher aside. I wanted to feel like a complete beginner that just started his vocal adventure and dreams of mastering the art of screaming, growling, and performing his favorite songs, maybe even starting own band. So I convinced myself that I don't have any experience, I am a complete beginner, and I put all of the trust in the process, in the course, and instructors and everything that they present. The first observation about this course that I can share with you is this. If you like it when instructors talk a lot, I mean really a lot, they often repeat themselves, there is a friendly, kind atmosphere, they laugh a lot, but the materials focus mainly on the theory. And the practice focuses mostly on the singing voice, on the clean voice. And there are very few methods, tools, and exercises for unlocking, discovering basic distorted noises and transforming those basic noises into actual screaming. Then this course is for you. But if you prefer a more straight-to-the-point approach, if you like to intertwine the theory and practice, keep them in a proper balance, and you want the practice to focus mostly on the extreme vocals, not your singing voice, of course, after acquiring necessary basics of the voice emission with the singing voice, but eventually you want the materials to focus mostly on the distorted vocals, and you like to have more tools, various methods, different approaches, different angles towards unlocking, discovering basic distorted noises, developing, transforming those basic noises into actual screaming, and then developing your screaming, I mean expanding your range, learning proper articulation, learning how to pronounce words, how to practice with the lyrics, how to increase the length of the sounds that you make, and other aspects of extreme vocal technique, then you might get quickly bored and irritated when practicing with this course, and you might often wonder, like, when the hell they will finally get to the point. After the first 4 hours of the course, I had the impression that everything that was presented so far could fit in just 1 hour max, or maybe even less, and it wouldn't lower the quality or efficiency of any material. And I've heard or read more opinions like that. You can learn more about it in the review that I wrote. Because in the beginning I wrote a 5 pages review, it took me about 2 hours. You'll find the link in the description below this video. And now let's talk a bit about Chris Liepe. I respect him very much, he is a great marketer, great businessman, he is very creative. He is also a great rock singer. He has a very good distortion for singing, wide vocal range, very interesting sound color of his voice that reminds me of a combination of Chris Cornell and Freddie Mercury. He can also pitch scream and yell scream, but his experience when it comes to more death metal, black metal, deathcore, or even metalcore vocals is very small, very limited. And his examples of those techniques in the course are very poor. I mean, they are below basic examples. So I know that each of us is learning. Learning is a process. For some people, it's faster. For some people, it's slower. I totally get it. Each of us learns differently. But if you decide to create or co-create the course that is dedicated to extreme vocal techniques, it would be good for you to be able to present even the most basic but properly performed sounds and examples of the techniques that you talk about in your own course. And here, his examples, throughout at least half of the course, can be described as breath distortion or a whisper scream. So if I paid for this course $366, which is like 1,400 in my currency, in zloty, PLN, which is an equivalent of monthly rent that I pay, or 2 times more than I spend for food each month, and I eat really a lot. Then I would get really pissed off because I paid such a huge amount of money only to listen to a guy that is performing breath distortion and whisper scream and is looking for a deeper sense in it. But when it comes to reality, it's just fucking breath distortion, it's just a fucking whisper scream, and you just can't fucking produce this sound properly. And you created this course, and this course was all your idea, and you are responsible for your participants, because whether you like it or no, and no matter if you claim to be expert or no, people listen to you and treat you as an expert, as an inspiration. They follow you and they recreate the sounds that you produce. And now I understand why some of the students that practice with this course caught a lot of bad habits. For example, there's one person from Australia that has a lot of extra breath in the false chord. The false chord placement is right, but the sounds that are produced are filled with this extra breath that sounds almost whispery. And the same thing relates to the upper constriction, which might be some alternative to fry scream, but it engages different tissues in the larynx, but the sound in the end is similar. But anatomy is different and mechanics is different between fry scream and the upper constriction presented in this course. But anyway, the upper constriction often sounds just like a fucking whisper scream. And now I know why those students struggle with these things and why we both struggle during our practices, because we spend a lot of time and we need to focus really hard on getting rid of this extra whisper or extra breath from the sounds that they produce. Now I understand like what is the origin of this weird habit in the case of those students that practiced previously before practicing with me with this course. So this is why I talk about it. Instructor is a very important person, and bad takes are okay. Bad takes are fine because first of all they show you that the instructor is just a human being like you. He makes mistakes. He can also fall into some traps. You can listen to those traps. You can learn what you should avoid. But the good takes are the thing that help you to progress, to move forward, to do better, to figure out how to do things. The quality of the example that you follow is crucial for the success or failure of your practice. And it's very hard to produce the right sound when you listen to bad takes for the most of time. And Chris makes some progress. In the second half of the course, he sounds better. He can produce some basic false chord. It's often filled with his clean voice. I think it's because he's a rock singer, and people that are used more to singing, not screaming, tend to put a lot of pitch in the distorted vocals. So even if they aim for false chord, it can be filled with pitch, like distortion for singing, for example. So each of us has a different background, level of experience, habits, muscle memory. Each of us has a different tempo of learning. The process of learning looks a bit differently in case of each of us. But if you are a fucking instructor, then just make some effort and present some good takes that people can be properly inspired by, and they can follow, and they can benefit from what they hear and what they try to replicate, not develop bad, unhealthy, probably not useful habits. Especially if the whole thing is worth of $366, which isn't a low price. It isn't cheap even for those of my students that earn over $100,000 in USA or Australia, or 100,000 euros. It's not a very cheap thing in their opinion too. And I don't mention other countries, for example, like Poland, where you have to pay like 4 times more to get this course. So do you know what I mean? I mean the proportion between the price that you pay and the value that you receive is imbalanced very much. And this is something that I also heard quite a lot of times, and you can read about it in the review that I wrote before recording this video. So if the main instructor was Will, actual expert in the field of screaming, if he could talk more, show more, especially basic examples, and he could show how to transform those basic sounds gradually, step by step, into full, strong, firm, powerful screaming sounds, then it would be much better course, much more effective, much more helpful for every participant, no matter if they were beginners or more advanced singers or screamers that are interested in improving their technique, taking their vocals to the next level. That would work much better. And if Chris Liepe was more like a test subject or a participant, not a co-creator, not an instructor in the course, but just a learner, it would be okay. You could observe his gradual growth and things like that, but his imperfections wouldn't affect you as a participant. That's the thing. There would be a proper balance between good takes and bad takes, what to avoid and what to stick to, what to replicate, of course, in your own unique, natural way. For some people, being better than the instructor might give a huge boost and increase their morale, which is very good and fantastic, but in the end, the bar is set very low, and the instructor should present at least slightly higher level of performance. And just to be clear, I am far from being perfect, and probably a lot of participants of my courses will be better than me, and that's great. But I still try to represent some reasonable level of performance, because I'm responsible for the safety and the growth of the people that put trust in my methods. I can't imagine a situation when I create or co-create a vocal course dedicated to techniques that I'm bad at or I don't have deep enough understanding of on a practical level. That wouldn't be fair for the people that would trust me, spend their money on things, on the course, on the product that is not going to fully help them because of lack of my proper practical experience. On the other hand, when I practiced along Will, the situation was completely different. Like maybe 1-2% of his takes weren't perfect, but it's good because you can hear that he's just a human being. Like, wow, Will Ramos is just a human like me or you or other person. He can make mistakes, he can fall into some traps if he gets distracted or if something doesn't work perfectly fine. Like, damn, it can happen to anyone. It's also very encouraging. You can hear traps that you should avoid and things that you should stick to. So that's great. And it's like 1-2% of all of the takes. And the rest of the takes are really fucking good. They are solid. And you can hear that the placement is right, the air pressure is right, the support is right, resonance is right. Everything is in the right place. And this is the real inspiration. This is the real example that you can follow along, that you can learn from. And when I was practicing along Will in some of the materials, and there's very few materials, like 3-4 that are of 4 or 5 minutes length, plus a recreant recording session that maybe is like 12 minutes, and maybe one more material or 2 materials showing the practice of Chris and Will, the lower constriction and upper constriction, Will and Elizabeth. But overall, if you compare the amount of Will's vocals to Chris Liepe, it would be probably like 50-50, or maybe there's even more of Chris Liepe vocals than Will Ramos, except the recreant recording session. So those proportions are, in my opinion, also not right, because Will is the proper example of those vocals, a proper inspiration to learn from. But anyway, when I was practicing along Will and I was like repeating the material over and over again, I started to notice new exciting things about my voice, new qualities, better compression and things like this. And even if those examples, those exercises were very basic, like very basic, just single noises with syllables or single vowels or something like this, nothing that can develop this scream into a whole phrase, into something very high, something very low, something very powerful, loud, or something very long, or into actual lyrics. Just basis, just the core of the sound, very core, very foundation of the sound, it was still very useful. In my case, it's easy because I can enunciate, I can pronounce, I can articulate. So in the end of the course, in the final lectures materials, I could take the quality of the voice that I discovered on a basic level with Will and easily translate it into the words. But if I didn't have this experience, that would be really hard and I would just stick with oo, ah, u. So it would be very helpful if Will was showing not only basic core foundation of the sound, but if he also could show how to gradually make this sound much higher, much lower, much longer, quieter, louder, how to pronounce different vowels, how to modify those vowels, all of the vowels, how to practice with the alphabet, how to practice with the lyrics, how to perform song, maybe a cappella in the beginning and then along the backing track, the instrumental and things like this. And they are missing and they would be very, very helpful, especially for the beginners. And as for Elizabeth Zharoff, I hope that I pronounce your name properly. If not, sorry, it's not intentional. You can clearly hear and see that she is a very conscious, well-trained, well-educated singer. More specifically, professional opera singer. So you can't deal with it. It's like she is just fucking good on her field. And you can learn a lot of helpful things from her. For example, a proper vocal onset, which is the beginning of the phrase. And the beginning of the phrase often, if not always, determines the quality and the comfort of the whole phrase. So the vocal onset, very helpful thing. I also cover it even in the course that is 4.5 years old. And even if I am not a professional opera singer, I still covered this topic in my first course. So it's not something new or like invention of a wheel, but it's still very good that someone talks about it because that's the first time that I hear about vocal onset from a person that is teaching screaming. It's so rare, but it's so useful, it's so helpful. So you can learn about the vocal onset from this course, about different ways of modifying vowels, modifying the shape of the vocal tract, which is modifying the sound color of your voice. You can learn a lot about proper breath support, breath control, breathing technique, the resonance, and the anatomy and the mechanics behind the phonation, what is happening in the body when you make certain voices, noises, and things like this. So it's helpful. Even if the most of those things doesn't directly translate into your ability of how to scream, it's still very helpful, especially for those of people that are interested in being more conscious, aware of the processes that happen in their body when they are using their voice. So that's a helpful thing, raising awareness, consciousness, this body awareness, and this technical awareness that isn't very common in the field of extreme vocals. During the course, Elizabeth mastered some kind of a whistle scream. This type of a scream is very effective. I mean, it's very showy. It makes people drop jaw, and there's this wow effect. Maybe it's not very consistent, but it's pretty good. And there were some times when her scream sounded like a high-pitched fry scream, and that was actually a very good thing, but it didn't repeat too many times. But anyway, let's stick to this high-pitched, slightly squeaky, whistly scream with the upper constriction. Technically, such a type of a sound isn't very difficult to discover. Real problems appear when people try to change the register from the whistle, for example, to the falsetto, head voice, not mentioned in the chest voice. It's very, very challenging. It's just like you climbed up on a very high mountain and you are like, fuck, how do I get down from here? And you are stuck. It's also much more difficult to pronounce words, to use various vowels, and it's very easy to create extra tension, constrictions, and blocks inside of your larynx, which may tire out your voice very fast. And it's also much easier to create extra friction that can cause pain and discomfort. So this is why the whistle scream isn't the best technique to begin with. It's not very hard to discover on a basic level, but it's very challenging and demanding when it comes to maintaining a proper amount of tension, support, air pressure. So in the beginning it might be easy, But if you want to make something serious with it, like performing a phrase, part of a song, or performing a lower scream, then you might meet a lot of obstacles on your way. And if they show this whistle scream, they should, at least in my opinion, present ways of how to modify the sound color, how to change the register, to not be stuck only in this very high, thin, squeaky space. Because some people that practice with this course might get the same result, but then they might feel that they are stuck and they can only do this squeaky high-pitched noise, but they have no fucking idea of how to change it and how to learn something else. That's the thing. After completing the course, I had an impression that it's not necessarily designed to teach you how to actually scream, but it's more about helping you to discover various properties, natural predispositions, and abilities of your voice. And if you will manage to learn how to scream in the process, that's great, but it's not the main purpose, the main goal of this course. Of course, there is a lot of useful and helpful information in this course. There is just one sensation impression that comes to me every time when I think about this course. It's just the word imbalance. But anyway, I've made a couple of notes about things, the most helpful things that I would learn as a beginner. The first thing, if you don't immediately get what you're looking for, relax and take a break. Then come back to the topic and hit it from a different angle. If necessary, take small steps and constantly monitor how far you can go without losing proper technique and comfort. Everyone has a different pace of development, and it's worth observing what is right for you. The second thing, make the weirdest and craziest noises possible. Be inspired by cartoon characters, dubbing actors, animals can be great inspiration as well. Firstly, make those weird, crazy noises to get to know your own unique voice better. Learn what are its natural capabilities as best as possible, which can often surprise you. And secondly, to break down any barriers and limitations related to shame or harsh self-assessment. Make these crazy noises and have fun with it. And when you discover something great, write it down or record it and come back to it from time to time, because maybe it can be used to further develop your vocals or discover a completely new technique. It's all about working with a clean voice because it's easier to modify at the very beginning, and then what you discover, you can adapt to various forms of distorted vocals. This is very important. To start with the clean voice, it's easier to modify it, and then once you mastered basics of distortion, you can look for a bridge between what you discovered with your clean singing voice and the distorted noises. You can combine those two things together, but in the beginning it will be easier with your singing voice. The third thing, when practicing, don't focus too much on technique, at least at the beginning, and focus on freedom and naturalness. This will help you discover the natural potential of your voice. Once you've mastered the basics, you can start paying more attention to breath control, support, compression, etc. But at first, avoid trying to control what you can't control yet. 4. And it's my personal observation. Once you find your false vocal folds and are able to make various sounds with them at a consistent and comfortable level, then avoid excess air and too high air pressure in the sounds that you make. Learn how to improve your precision and observe how much you can narrow and focus the sound so that it does not get airy and becomes fuller and richer in sound each time you practice. At first, it is easier to activate the false vocal folds with a slight sigh, but then it is good to gradually move away from this. Look for ways to lean into the sound, to pierce into the sound instead of blowing or flat hitting it too much. 5. It is good to be aware of how important it is to begin the phrase properly, the vocal onset that we discussed earlier, because the quality and comfort of the whole length of the phrase often, if not always, depend on the quality of the vocal onset, the very beginning of the sound that you make. 6. It's very good to understand how important is the shape of the vocal tract for the sound of a scream. The lower you want to sound, the more you have to lengthen it, which means that you can drop or lower your larynx lift your soft palate and play around with your tongue. For example, shape it like this. La 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 la, la 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 la. And the higher you want to sound, the more you need to shorten your vocal tract. You can, for example, lower your soft palate, delicately lift your larynx, make your voice
Na 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 na. Sound childish. You can use also twang. Na na na.
The childish thing and the twang weren't mentioned in the course, but I use them on a daily basis with my students. And when I record vocals, especially for black metal bands that like to have this gnarly, goblinish type of sound in their high screams. Okay, 7. It is good to learn how important and useful tool vowel modification is. Something I learned years ago while studying the complete vocal technique course book, and which I often use with students during lessons. The complete vocal technique course book is really helpful. Their ability to show extreme vocals and distortion, screaming and things like that. Oh man, it's fucking bad. It really sucks. But when it comes to the anatomy, breathing technique, supporting technique, vowel modification, modification of the vocal tract shape, and modifying the sound color, learning how to sing better, complete vocal technique is one of the best singing methods in the world for singing, not screaming. But you can translate things from singing into the screaming. Of course, if you can scream, and they can't fucking scream. But I learned a lot since 10 years from the complete vocal technique course book. I also signed to their 1-year course, and I really can't wait to begin it. It's a fucking good course. Anyway, so it's very good to learn how important and how useful and helpful is the vowel modification. Sometimes a can be replaced with o or o, or something that sounds between a and o, like o, 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 o. Sometimes a can be replaced with ya, ya, ya. It's also very helpful, especially for the high-pitched screaming. You can listen to vocals of Mitch Lacker or Oliver Sykes when he was good at screaming. He's getting better at screaming again, but I mean the old era, Pray for Plagues and things like that. He's often, instead of a, doing ya. That's a very, very helpful thing. It really helps a lot of my students, and me too. The e can be replaced, for example, with a, like the word me or see is often pronounced, especially with the higher screens, as may or say. In singing too, you can listen to Bleed the Freak by Alice in Chains, and there's a line like, this stands for me, and he's doing this stand for May. And then there's a line, I'd like to see, and he's singing, I'd like to say. Articulation in singing and screaming is much more flexible than in speech, so you can modify almost every possible consonant and vowel, especially vowel. It's handy especially for the highest screams, pig squeals, gutturals, tunnel throat screams. When practicing placement, for example in a technique involving false vocal folds, avoid using your clean voice, as it will disturb the precision of activation of your false chords. First, learn how to engage your vestibular false fold in a precise and comfortable way. Learn at least the basic sounds and only then modify them, for example by adding your clean voice, for example to get a pitched growl or scream, for example as vocals in Gojira. 9. Figure out what helps you to improve the comfort and quality of your vocal activity. In the course, there are 2 very helpful materials about the vocal hygiene and various supplements that you can use to enhance your comfort or improve the tempo of recovery of your voice. And they are called deleted scenes. I have no idea why they would delete such helpful things. It's good that they use them in the actual course. So, learn what things help you to feel or sound better or recover your voice faster. Warm tea, drops with honey, Luxvox method that is called differently in the course, warm shower, inhalations, proper hydration, good sleep, avoiding alcohol, avoiding coffee. Anything that makes you feel better and sound better is worth sticking to. And these are the most valuable things that I refreshed when practicing with this course. Anyway, For me, it's a pity that Will is not talking more, is not presenting more things, more various different methods and exercises for discovering, unlocking basic types of distortion, transforming those basic sounds into actual screaming, and further developing those basic screaming sounds into something that can be used in an actual song and vocal performance with the band, for example. I myself was hoping that I will take a few things in my vocal technique to the next level. For example, my ability to hold false chord growl for longer than 5, 6 or 7 seconds, avoiding extra air leaking with the false chord sound, especially when I am tired, improving the compression, things like that. And not only confirming the things that I already know and use during my own practice, practicing with my students, creating courses, recording tutorials, writing ebooks, recording vocals, performing vocals on the stage with my band, and things like that. Although there is one extremely helpful thing that I discovered in this course, maybe it doesn't translate to holding false chord sounds for longer, but it translates into delivering much deeper, darker, more massive sound, and it already helped a couple of my students. It's so simple, and I can't imagine how I could overlook it during my whole life as a vocalist. And it was mentioned when Will was asked about how he's performing his lows, and he told that he is elevating his tongue towards his upper teeth. And this is something that I do for years, but I was doing it with the w, 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 and Will is doing it with the la, 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 la. And Elizabeth noticed that the accent reminds a bit of Italian la 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 in opera singer. I'm not opera singer, so it sucks. But still, it's beneficial for the low false chord and it sounds much more massive, much darker, and it already helped a couple of my students to sound better with their lows. And I can't wait to use it tomorrow during the gig with my band. I also modify it to L. For me, it works even better than the la, but for my students, la 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 is working much more effectively. So you can test it as well for your false chord lows. But is it worth paying $366 for it? Judge by yourself. My task was to provide you with some observations, conclusions. I tried to be as constructive as possible and follow the voice of reason. So hopefully it will help. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great day.